आचार्य ठाकुर जे अनिल प्रेमाधना करुणा प्रचुर जे अनिल प्रेमाधना करुणा प्रचुर स्वरूप रूप कहाँ सनातन कहाँ मोरा स्वरूप रूप कहाँ सनातन कहाँ दास रघुनाथ पतित पावन कहाँ दास रघुनाथ पतित पावन जे अनिल प्रेमाधना करुणा प्रचुर जे अनिल प्रेमाधना करुणा प्रचुर जुग कहाँ कविराज कहाँ मोरा भट्ट जुग कहाँ कविराज एक काले कोठा गेला गोरा नटराज एक काले कोठा गेला नटराज जे अनिल प्रेमाधना करुणा प्रचुर जे अनिल प्रेमाधना करुणा प्रचुर पाषाण कोटिब माथा अनले पशिब पाषाण कोटिब माथा अनले पशिब गौरंग गुणेर निधि कोठा गेले गौरंग गुणेर निधि कोठा गेले पाबो जे अनिल प्रेमाधना करुणा प्रचुर जे अनिल प्रेमाधना करुणा प्रचुर संगीरा संगे जे कोई लोभिला से सब संगीरा संगे जे कोई लोभिला से संग ना पाया कांडे नरोत्तम दास से संग ना पाया काण्डे नरोत्तमदास जे अनिल प्रेमाधन करुणा प्रचुर जे अनिल प्रेमाधन करुणा प्रचुर हेनो प्रभु कोथा गेला आचार्य ठाकुर जे अनिल प्रेमाधन करुणा प्रचुर जे अनिल प्रेमाधन करुणा प्रचुर जे अनिल प्रेमाधन.
So now we'll listen to Radhika Raman Prabhu. Please let me know if the sound is not good.
I wanted to mention real quick, Mother Shobha Radhe, this was a lecture given in New Vrindavan during the GBC College in 2019, and it was Srila Prabhupada's disappearance day. And Radhika Raman Prabhu, he's a PhD scholar in religious studies. He's a lead professor at, I forget which university it is, I think Utah State. But he's also a devotee scholar. He did his PhD study on Jiva Goswami. He was asked to give this class, the Bhagavatam, the morning class on Srila Prabhupada's disappearance day. So anyway, that's just a little bit of background on, this particular class. I hope the devotees enjoy it. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 6, text number 29. Please repeat. Kalpanta idamadaya shayanem bhasyudanvataha shishayishoranupranam vivishentaraham vibho Kalpanta idamadaya shayanem bhasyudanvataha shishayishoranupranam vivishentaraham vibho Kalpanta idamadaya shayanem bhasyudanvataha shishayishoranupranam vivishentaraham vibho. Please chant.
Kalpanta idamadaya
Kalpanta idamadaya shayanem bhasyudanvataha shishayishoranupranam vivishentaraham vibho.
Kalpanta idamadaya
Kalpanta idamadaya
shayanem bhasyudanvataha
shayanem bhasyudanvataha shishayishoranupranam
vivishentaraham vibho.
vivishentaraham vibho. Ladies.
Kalpanta idamadaya
Kalpanta idamadaya
Shayanem
Shayanem
Vasyudanvataha
Hasyudanvataha Shishayishoranu Pranam Vivishentaraham Vibho Kalpanta idamadaya Shayanem Hasyudanvataha Shishayishoranu Pranam Vivishentaraham Vibho Kalpa ante, at the end of Brahma's day. Idam, this. Adaya, taking together. Shayane, having gone to lie down. Ambhasi, in the causal water. Udanvataha, devastation. Shishayisho, lying of the personality of Godhead Narayana. Anupranam, breathing. Vivishe, entered into. Antaha, within. Aham, I. Vibho, of Lord Brahma. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupad. At the end of the millennium, this is Narada speaking to Vyasadeva. At the end of the millennium, when the personality of Godhead, Lord Narayana, lay down within the water of devastation, Brahma began to enter into him along with all creative elements, and I also entered through his breathing. Purport. Narada is known as the son of Brahma, as Lord Krishna is known as the son of Vasudeva. The personality of Godhead and his liberated devotees, like Narada, appear in the material world by the same process. As it is said in the Bhagavad Gita, the birth and activities of the Lord are all transcendental. Therefore, according to authorized opinion, the birth of Narada as the son of Brahma is also a transcendental pastime. His appearance and disappearance are practically on the same level as that of the Lord. The Lord and his devotees are therefore simultaneously one and different as spiritual entities. They belong to the same category of transcendence. Om Jnana-timirandhasya jnananjana-shalakaya chakshurunmilitam jena tasmai shri gurave namaha. So I'd like to offer my respects to all of my seniors here. I'm very grateful for this opportunity to say a few words about Srila Prabhupada on the auspicious occasion of his disappearance. I was thinking about, actually I should ask first, how much time do I have for the talk class? Typically. No breakfast. Okay. Okay. I don't. Okay. Okay. So I want to give plenty of time for discussion as well. So, I was thinking about what Srila Prabhupada's disappearance meant to me, and I raised this question for myself because I was born 5 years after Srila Prabhupada departed this world. And so Srila Prabhupada's appearance in my life was basically simultaneous with his disappearance. His absence was something that was felt continuously from the very beginning. I remember as a child feeling a sense of loss, that somehow I missed this person who my seniors had met, and he was the center of our lives, and yet I was just a little too late. And that sense of, oh, I just missed him, grew to a real sense of loss as time went on. And I remember asking my parents, did you have a chance to meet Prabhupada? And they were in the United States when Prabhupada was preaching here. And yet they said, no, we never had that chance ourselves. And so what does this disappearance, this sense of disappearance mean? His disappearance was something very real, but so was his presence in our lives. And that presence was very tangible. It is very tangible in the lives of Srila Prabhupada's disciples, of course, but even those who have never met him, his grand disciples, or now his great grand disciples. I remember one time I was in Radhadesh in Belgium, and it was Lord Nrsingadev's appearance day. And the devotees put on a play, and I was expecting it to be the usual Nrsinga Chaturdashi play, where, you know, the story of Hiranyakashipu is there, and the demon is kind of both a demon and sort of a slapstick sort of humor figure, and then at some point Nrsingadev jumps out from behind a pillar. But it wasn't like that at all. The whole play was very different. It was based loosely on Satsvarup Maharaj's book, Am I a Demon or a Vaishnava? And it was told from the perspective of someone who was Hiranyakashipu's assistant, another demon, whose son, had been influenced by Prahlad's instruction. And as the story progressed, the first part of it was more or less the standard story of how Prahlad is, terrorized by his father and so on. But as the Lord's appearance approached, all of a sudden the scene started to change, and this friend of Hiranyakashipu's, this assistant, ended up in prison because his favorableness towards Prahlad became known to Hiranyakashipu. So he ended up in jail. And as Lord Nrsingadev appears, we're watching him in prison. And we're missing the whole event, right, in this play. Until after the Lord's appearance is over, Prahlad and this friend of his come down into the prison, into the dungeon, and there they release this assistant of Hiranyakashipu, Prahlad's friend's father. And he wants to know what happened. And Prahlad spends the next few minutes describing the Lord's appearance in great detail. And I cannot tell you how powerful that description was. In that few minutes, I felt more palpably the Lord's appearance than in any other drama of Lord Nrsingadev I had seen. With all the costumes and all the sound effects, but it was the role of Prahlad was played by a little girl in Radhadesh, and she did such a good job of expressing the emotions that Prahlad felt, the scene as he saw it, that the whole audience was completely overcome by the Lord's appearance. And in many ways, our experience of Lord Nrsingadev was more direct, was more personal than had he jumped out from behind the stage himself. And this is the very principle of parampara. This is the whole substance of parampara, that our experience of the spiritual master and of his spiritual master and of Krishna himself becomes more and more direct as time goes on, just as my glasses are, right? I see the world through these glasses. And in that sense, one could argue that my experience of the world is indirect, because I don't see the world directly, but through that glass. And yet, I certainly know from my experience that when I take these glasses off, my experience of the world is much less direct. In fact, it's quite blurry. But when I put them on, that's sharp, it's clear. And as the parampara passes through, the paradox is as Krishna goes more distant, as the spiritual masters become more distant, they become closer. They become more personal, they become more intimate, they become more palpably present. And so it is with Srila Prabhupada, that his disappearance, as Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has so beautifully said, he reasons ill who says that a Vaishnava dies when thou art living still and sound. A Vaishnava dies to live, and while living spreads the holy name around. That Srila Prabhupada's presence can be felt as closely and as palpably and as directly today and in the future as it could back then. Otherwise, if that were not the case, just think of the alternative. What it would mean is that after the disappearance of an Acharya, after disappearance of Srila Prabhupada, every generation's link would become successively weaker. The parampara would become successively weaker. Our grasp on Krishna's mercy would become weaker. And over time, the whole tradition, the whole parampara would fizzle out, along with the knowledge that came with it. That's the alternative. But we know that's not the case. This is why we're still sitting here thousands of years after Krishna speaks to Arjuna, is because that, over time, that level of that connection becomes more and more intense. It becomes more and more personal. Like that famous statement of Srila Prabhupada when a reporter asks him, what will happen to your movement after you die? And Srila Prabhupada says, I will never die. I will always live in my books. I remember this story from Bhakti Bringa Govinda Maharaj. He was in Delhi once trying to get his visa renewed, in his Indian visa. And he was faced with the huge behemoth of Indian bureaucracy. And as he went into the office, and there was the person in the front, and you need to fill out this form, and then take this form to that office, and once they stamp it, then take it to this office, and they'll give you a second form that you'll need here, and then do this and do that. And he saw that this was not a one-day process. It would take a week to get all this done. And he didn't have that kind of time left on his visa, or that kind of time to stick around in Delhi. So his anxiety was palpable to the person at the front desk. And he looked at him up and down and he said, you're a follower of Swami Prabhupada, right? And he said, yes, I am. He said, okay, hold on a minute. I'll help you. And so he took Maharaj from one office to another, and from one person to another, called in favors, and within a matter of hours, got his visa stamped and renewed and everything. Maharaj was, of course, very grateful for this and was thanking him. But just as he was getting ready to leave, this man pulled out a book from under his desk drawer, and said, the reason I helped you is because I have this book from Srila Prabhupada, and it has changed my life in a very, very deep way. Do you think, as a return favor, you could arrange a meeting between me and Srila Prabhupada? And Bhakti Bringa Govinda Maharaj was faced with telling him that I'm so sorry, but Prabhupada passed away in 1977. And when this man heard that, he broke down crying in tears, in exactly the same way a person would cry after having received the news of their father's death. I mean, it was very clear to Maharaj that this is a person who has a direct and personal relationship with Srila Prabhupada, just through one of his books. And each one of us can experience that through the pages of Srila Bhagavatam, through the pages of Srila Prabhupada's Bhaktivedanta purports. Initially, when we start reading Prabhupada's books, we often do it as an exercise in gaining content. We're mining Prabhupada's books for content and for information, trying to understand what he's saying, what this point is, a new point that might be useful in another class, trying to connect the different pieces and the different parts, work through apparent contradictions. But after some time, we've been through Prabhupada's books enough that we know the basic point he's making. And a wonderful senior devotee told me once, he asked me, he said, you know, I've I've read all of Prabhupada's books and I know them thoroughly. Why do I still read Prabhupada's books? Why do you still read Prabhupada's books? And I gave that some thought. And for me, it's really because reading Prabhupada's books is a way to relate to him. It's a way to access our relationship. We can get to know Prabhupada intimately, his personality, his moods, his instructions, not in general, to us, directly through the pages of his books. And that relationship, you can read the same content hundreds of times. In fact, it comes to a point where sometimes reading Prabhupada's books is like listening to a grandfather who, perhaps you have someone like that in your life, where you'll be at the dinner table and talking about something, and all of a sudden he'll say, you know, when I was fighting in the Vietnam War, and you know exactly where that conversation is going and what story is about to come, right? Because you know that person well enough that you know that in this circumstance, they're likely to tell that story. And sometimes you're reading Prabhupada's books, you're reading his purports, and you know what's about to come. You know what verse he's going to quote, you know what points he's going to make, and well, sure enough, there it is. And yet, it's wonderful. It's wonderful to be in the presence of that grandfather who will tell you that story again and again and again. And each time it's fresh, and each time it's new, and each time it's enjoyable to listen to. Now, having said that, okay, yes, there's Prabhupada's words and his books. He makes the same points many, many times. He speaks against the Mayavadis again and again and again. But along with that, our ability to know Prabhupada, to understand him, to predict him even, Prabhupada always manages to surprise us. He always manages to take our breath away, one way or the other, when we're least expecting it sometimes. I remember recently I was reading first canto, The Passing Away of Bhishma Dev. And Prabhupada's purports in that chapter are beautiful, describing when Bhishma Dev is lying on the bed of arrows and the Pandavas and all the great sages come to see him in his final moments. And as the conversation concludes and the time for Bhishma Dev's departure has arrived, he withdraws from all the conversation and focuses his mind and his heart entirely on Krishna, remembering Krishna in the way that he loves him best, on the battlefield of Kurukshetra as Arjuna's charioteer. And his memory of Krishna is fixed, it's sharp. He remembers which hand Krishna is holding the reins in and which hand is holding the whip of the chariot. He remembers the fact that when Krishna ran towards him, he dropped his upper garment on the way. He remembers the dust on his forehead and the drops of sweat decorating his face. And most of all, he's taking pleasure in the fact that Krishna is wounded and is bleeding by the wounds caused by his arrows. And he's taking pride in that fact. And as he's remembering Krishna, Prabhupada has this beautiful purport where he describes the whole scene, and a couple of purports actually. And he tells us that this vision of Krishna, decorated like this, with dust and sweat and blood, and holding the reins of the chariot and the whip, was not visible even to Arjuna. Why? Because Arjuna was behind the whole scene, right? He couldn't see this beautiful vision. This was something that Krishna was relating exclusively with Bhishma Dev. It was a personal vision for Bhishma Dev. And he says that when Krishna ran towards Bhishma Dev at that moment, He ran to him as a lover runs toward a lover. And Prabhupada puts that in italics. As a lover runs towards a lover. This is Bhishma Dev trying to wound Krishna and Krishna trying to kill Bhishma Dev. Okay? Just to be clear, that's the scene. It's powerful, it's amazing the way Prabhupada is describing the scene and showing us. Just like I was telling with that story. When we hear it from the next person, it's more powerful than if we see it ourselves. And at that point, after describing that whole scene in such a beautiful way, at the very end, Prabhupada says, and this wonderful vision is available only to the devotees. Those Mayavadis who want impersonal liberation, Krishna gives it to them. They can have it. But this vision is only available to the personalists, to the devotees of the Lord. And the devotees are satisfied with this in all respects. And I read that and I was thinking, wow, this is the most powerful argument against Mayavad I've heard. Prabhupada spends so much time arguing against the specific philosophical points of impersonalism. And this is his mission, right? Nirvishesha, Shunyavadi, Paschatya Deshatarine. To rid this world of the power of impersonalism. And he takes every opportunity. And so this beautiful purport describing this intimate mood of rasa between Krishna and his devotee. Prabhupada can't resist the opportunity. Take one jab. But boy, does this jab hit hard. Right? It really hits hard. Why? Because Prabhupada basically lays out the scene and then he says, this is what you're missing. It's almost like as kids, you know, we used to go, Prabhupada's doing that to the impersonalists, is saying, you see what you're missing? Right? It's totally surprising. It's a whole argument. It's one sentence long. And I had missed that in every other reading of this chapter. Prabhupada's personality comes through in his purport, so clear, so bright. I remember one more purport in the 7th canto. I was speaking about this to the GBC college students yesterday. That in the story of Hiranyakashipu, when it's describing how he terrorizes the universe, it tells us how Hiranyakashipu is destroying the environment around him. He's cutting down trees and plants and bushes. And Prabhupada has this powerful purport where he talks about how terrible it is when people destroy and kill trees. And he says this is the most sinful activity one can do, is to kill trees unnecessarily. And he specifically targets the paper industry, which he says produces all this nonsense literature that people read for a couple of hours and then throw away. How useless it is that trees' lives are sacrificed for it. And the natural thought that occurs immediately is what? Well, what about your books, Prabhupada? Here we are reading Srimad Bhagavatam on paper. And the typical person would say something halfway apologetic, like, yes, we understand that we too have to use paper, but this is for a higher purpose, and so it's okay, etc., etc. That's what an average person would do. But Prabhupada's not typical, and he's not average. He comes at it with this mood. He anticipates that argument, and he says, yes, these books are printed on paper, and these are the only books that should be printed on paper. This is the only thing paper should be used for. Wow. He puts it in whoever's making that argument, Prabhupada puts it in their face and says, forget me apologizing. I'm telling you, this is the only thing you ought to be using paper for, is to read my books. Prabhupada's spirit comes shining through in that purport, his chivalrous spirit of preaching Krishna consciousness. So an entirely personal relationship with Srila Prabhupada is possible through his books. We can know his personality, we can know his moods, we can know his instructions, of course. And Prabhupada will speak to us directly through his books, personally. Not just generally, but directly and personally. And I'm sure all of us who've been reading Prabhupada's books for some time have that experience of picking up Srimad Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita and having Prabhupada speak directly to our situation. So Prabhupada is very much here. It's very much true that he doesn't die as he's promised. And yet, there are ways in which Srila Prabhupada can disappear. There are ways in which his disappearance can become a tragedy for us. And these are things that we want to avoid. For example, if we give up hearing Srila Prabhupada's Vani, Prabhupada will actually disappear. Not just physically, but actually disappear. So often it happens amongst the disciples of Srila Prabhupada's disciples that we can spend weeks, can go by without us directly engaging with Srila Prabhupada's Vani. This has been my experience. We listen to many wonderful Vaishnavas and their wonderful lectures and their kathas that are all good. We read many wonderful books written by wonderful Vaishnavas. We listen to Bhagavatam classes, and yet we fail to engage with Srila Prabhupada's own words, his own Vani. In his Pranam mantra, it's right there, Gaura Vani Pracharine. Srila Prabhupada comes to give Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's words, his Vani, his voice. And those words of Mahaprabhu, that power of Mahaprabhu is directly present in Srila Prabhupada's words. And if we lose our connection with Srila Prabhupada's words, if we never listen to his classes, for the first time in Vaishnava history, we have that Vani recorded in thousands of hours of classes. And if we fail to listen to those classes, when Prabhupada gives public addresses, he's making many direct and straightforward points each time. He makes certain points. And yet every single time you listen to Prabhupada's class, there's something that will strike your heart. There's something different. There's something special that will emerge. It might be the most basic class to the most basic audience. But the power of the words of the pure devotee strike the heart in a very, very deep way. We know this from Shastra. And yet if we fail to take advantage of it, that means Prabhupada will actually disappear. That we will lose his presence in the generations to come. Prabhupada will actually disappear if we reduce him to just one more member of our parampara. Yes, Srila Prabhupada's picture is there in the line of our disciplic succession at the bottom of every altar. And he is a member of our parampara. And yet, for us, he's special. He's more than just one more picture in the line of spiritual masters. When I visit the homes of devotees, I often request them, I say, yes, you have Prabhupada's picture there in the parampara picture, but please have a separate picture of Prabhupada on your altar, a little bit bigger. It needs to be there. He needs to be there on his own. This is the standard he gave us. Install him on a Vyasasana. If you can't do that, at least put a separate picture on your altar so that we recognize that Srila Prabhupada is directly our spiritual master. He's our Shiksha Guru. His instructions, he is the founder Acharya. Yes, there are many, many Acharyas. And yes, there will be more to come. And yet Srila Prabhupada's position as founder Acharya is special. If we reduce him to just one more of our ancestors, then he will disappear. Future generations will lose his palpable presence in the direct way that we know him now. We can also lose Srila Prabhupada's presence if we make our worship of Srila Prabhupada, if we reduce our worship of Srila Prabhupada to just a ritual. Our homage to Srila Prabhupada, if we turn it into a pious ritual, something that we have to pay lip service to, it's like one of the 10 offenses to the holy name, to consider it a pious ritual. So often we have, we see these, these automated Prabhupada machines, the japa recorders. The same 10-second clip of Prabhupada chanting japa is repeated again and again and again, ad infinitum. Played in devotees' homes, just below the volume that you can consciously listen to. For what purpose? So Prabhupada can turn into his voice can create auspiciousness in our homes, can create a good atmosphere for us that's ritually nice, so that when we sleep in on Saturday mornings, Prabhupada's mantra is going, he's taking care of the spiritual environment. I tell devotees, at least play the full 20 minutes or 25 minutes we have of Prabhupada's japa, so that you can hear how he's chanting the holy name. It's not difficult. These days we have this repeat play on our iPhones and Androids and all of that, so that we can hear personally how Prabhupada's a person and he's chanting the holy names. His voice sometimes goes up and sometimes goes down, sometimes increases in intensity. How he never stops being our spiritual master even when he's chanting japa, and surprises us every time by saying, sit properly. At least play that. Or even better, we have hundreds of hours of Prabhupada's kirtan. Play something that you want to listen to, a particular kirtan that you want to sing in Srila Prabhupada's presence. Hear his mood, how he's doing it. Remember what he's saying. When he sings Hari Hari Bifale, with that intensity, and you've seen that video perhaps, his head shaking in intensity as he's singing that song, how life is wasted. I have knowingly drunk poison. Then we can relate to Srila Prabhupada personally. But if we turn his worship into just a ritual, there's that story, I forget who tells it, whether it's Shrutakirti Prabhu or Harishori Prabhu, how when he was serving Prabhupada, he would come into his room, offer obeisances, put down the water, offer obeisances, go, come back in the room, offer obeisances, do something. And Prabhupada stopped him at like the third time. And he said, what is this hatchet? And Prabhupada, what do you mean? He says, what is this hatchet? And then Prabhupada did the motion of obeisances. He was referring to the offering of obeisances. This mechanical, he felt it was too mechanical. Coming in, bang, head on the ground, go off, bang on the ground, go off. His point, we should do it meaningfully, not as a ritual that just turns the spiritual master as a pious thing to pay homage to, because that's the right thing to do. These are ways in which Srila Prabhupada can actually disappear, that he can fade from ISKCON, fade from our memories, fade from our presence. And that would be the real tragedy. 1977 was no doubt painful, but Prabhupada is still present through his books, through his devotees, through his temples, through his institution. But if we forget him in these ways, then we will actually lose him. And so what's the antidote? What do we do? There are so many things, but one thing that I've been thinking a lot about recently is to add meaning to whatever we already do for Srila Prabhupada. Take, for example, this very simple thing. Every time we offer our obeisances, we say, Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Picharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Deshadarine. This the second one in particular, in 1967, Srila Prabhupada introduced this mantra himself. He wrote it. And he asked his disciples to chant it. In some ways, it encapsulates Prabhupada's own conception of himself, what his mission was, what he wanted to convey to all of us. It's full of meaning, and we can experience that meaning every time we offer our obeisances to Srila Prabhupada. Take, for example, just that first word, namaste. First thing to note is the word te. This is in Sanskrit an address which means you. It means you. Now, this prayer is not glorifying Prabhupada in the third person. It's not saying, and he is such a wonderful person, and he is so amazing. It's a prayer that we're speaking directly to him. You, Srila Prabhupada. We're in his presence, we're addressing him. And it's not the overly respectful form either. In Sanskrit you have a highly respectful form, bhavataha, which means, oh, you honorable personality. It's the regular form. It's a form that's intimate, that's used to address a family member, a father, a mother, a child, a friend, direct and personal. Te, you. Just a simple you. To you, namaha, I offer my obeisances. Just this word namaha, so much packed full of meaning. So much packed full of meaning. On the basic level, namaha is just an act of submission. An act of offering obeisance to the spiritual master and saying, you are my master. It's an act of surrendering our false ego and saying, Srila Prabhupada, you're the boss. This is not an easy thing to do. I mean, we know in our experience, it's often easier to offer, when people first come to the temple, it's easier for them to offer their obeisances to Krishna than it is to Srila Prabhupada. Because it's easier to bow to someone who's distant, who's God, than someone who appears to be human just like us. That takes a lot more from our ego. To say, this person has 2 hands and 2 legs, and just like me, and lived the earth and walked the earth just like me a few decades ago, and I have to bow down to him. So it's a submission, it's an offering of our false ego. When Lord Brahma visits Dwarka, you know this story from Chaitanya Charitamrita. Then Krishna has this whole lila where Brahma comes and Krishna asks him, which Brahma has come to see me? And Brahma is full of ego at that time. And he says, what do you mean, which Brahma? It's me, Brahma. And Krishna says, oh, okay. And at that point, in that moment, he calls all the Brahmas from all the different planets. And they come to that place, enter that room that Krishna's in. And most of them, all of them, have more heads than our Brahma does. Sometimes thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of heads. And Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami describes that when all of their heads touch the ground, it makes a crashing sound. There are so many crowns that are metal and hitting the ground. And our Brahma feels like a tiny little speck on the wall, like a fly. That is the purpose of obeisance. One purpose of obeisance is submitting our egos, our crowns, before the spiritual master and saying, Prabhupada, I'm yours, you're the boss, tell me what to do. But offering obeisances can be even deeper than that. We read in Srimad Bhagavatam that famous verse, Tattenu gampam susamikshemana bhunjana evatma kritam vipakam hridvar vapurbhir vidadhan namaste. Same word, namaste. I offer obeisances to you, Krishna. How? Hrid vag vapurbhir. With my body, with my words, and with my heart. Offering obeisances to Krishna can be a full surrender. Offering obeisances to our spiritual master should be a full surrender of our body, our mind, and our words. Our heart. This is why when we offer obeisances, we should always put our hands up in front of us. When we put our body on the ground, our head on the floor, face down, this is one of the most vulnerable positions that a human being can take. You can't see who's coming behind you. You can't see what that person's going to do. If you need to get up to defend yourself, it's going to take a lot of time from that position. And when we put our hands forward, we show the spiritual master we've got nothing to hide. You know, when the police stop you in the United States, what's the first thing they want to see? Your hands. Right? You have to show them your hands. Because it gives them the confidence. This person's not hiding anything. They're not going to pull anything out on me. We put our hands before Srila Prabhupada and our head on the ground. We say, Prabhupada, I'm totally vulnerable. My life is yours. And you have the freedom to do with it what you like. You can trample me, or you can pick me up. But look, I have nothing to defend myself with. We can offer with our words. This is why Srila Prabhupada asked us to chant his pranam prayer and chant it loud enough that he could hear. So that we're engaging our words in that offering as well, when we offer obeisances. And if we utilize our body and our words, then just maybe, we might even offer obeisances with our heart. Hrit. You know, when Dhruva Maharaj first comes in front of Lord Vishnu, when Vishnu gives him darshan, the Bhagavatam describes that the boy Dhruva fell down to the ground like a golden rod. And with his outstretched arms, in his heart, he grasped the feet of the Lord. Not physically, in his heart, he grasped the feet of the Lord and pulled those feet within his heart and held them there. What a deep and powerful experience offering obeisances can be. This is why in Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna describes those final verses, Manmana bhavamad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru, he describes things generally. Think of me, become my devotee, offer your homage to me. But there's only one thing that he says specifically to do. Mam namaskuru, offer obeisance to me, bow down before me. That's the only specific physical act that he mentions in that verse. Because it's a full body experience. Body, mind, heart, all of it. I've seen this personally. Disciples of Srila Prabhupada bowing before him, and you see their faces coming up once they've been on the floor, and it's transformed. There's been an act of full offering on the ground. How many times do we pay obeisances when we come into the temple? How many times do we speak Prabhupada's pranam prayers? It doesn't take any more time. It just takes consciousness. That we do what we're already doing, and we do it with meaning. We do it with feeling. We take Srila Prabhupada's pranam mantra, and we invest whatever we feel about Prabhupada, whatever is our relationship with Srila Prabhupada, we invest it in those prayers as we sing them during Mangalarti. The words are there, the meaning is there. We can chant it mechanically, we can chant it with feeling, we can make it personal. Each one of us has a personal relationship with Srila Prabhupada. Times in which Prabhupada has helped us, he's picked us up, he's guided us, he's chastised us. We can take all of that. We can look at Srila Prabhupada and say, you and I, we know each other. I'm your servant. We've been through so much together. I've tried my best to serve you. You've helped me. Now all of that, what we've been through, what our feeling is, we can take his pranam prayers like a vessel, like a cup, and we can fill it with the feelings that we have for Srila Prabhupada. Our relationship with Srila Prabhupada, we can invest it in that. and we can offer it to him each time we chant those pranam prayers. In this way, we can make something we already do 100 times, and instead of making it a hatchet, we can make it something full of meaning, and we can make it full of feeling. And in this way, we can ensure that Srila Prabhupada never disappears. Srila Prabhupada's disappearance does not have to be a reality in our lives. It is, and yet it's not. It doesn't have to be. Like with Krishna's absence, in absence, presence can be felt more deeply. This is the nature of love in general. That in the absence of someone we love, we think of them more deeply. And because of that thought, their presence is felt more intimately. And so on a day like this, Srila Prabhupada's disappearance day, we can make Srila Prabhupada's disappearance day the day of his appearance in our lives. It's the day of his disappearance from this world in 1977. But it can be the day of his appearance today in our lives, in our practice. That's up to us. We can use that disappearance as a conduit to make his appearance even more stronger than it has ever been in our own lives. So those are my thoughts on what this day has meant for me. I'll pause there and see if any of you have any thoughts or questions or comments or experience that you would like to share as well.
Hare Krishna devotees, we have a little bit more of this class and we will listen to it in entirety, but I was just wondering if anybody would like to say their realizations or any commitments they want to make on this day. I think that was a very powerful lecture, a good reminder of how we need to actually feel his presence and not, become ritualistic, which can happen when we are doing the same thing every day. We could start to take things for granted. So if anybody wants to, please raise your hand and say something. And otherwise, I will continue to play. I'm sure there are wonderful realizations. I think there were a lot of senior people there that day. I'm sure there'll be good things for us to hear and learn from. But if anybody wants to say something, go ahead, Mother Suman.
Oh, Hare Krishna Mataji, I'm really feeling very fortunate to listen to this class. It's really full of information. Each line is very important. And we should do bhakti with meaning. And really, it was a very impactful class. And thank you for bringing it. And I just wanted to say about Srila Prabhupada. He said that when we read his books, it feels like personally he's talking to us. So that's what we feel actually, and we should read more books. We'll take advantage. Thank you very much, Hare Krishna.
Thank you. All right, I will continue to play, and if anybody wants to say something, while we're going through it, or at the end, we can try that again. Hare Krishna.
Just a little small thought when you're talking about how Prabhupada can always say something that was unexpected. Prabhupada can always say something unexpected. So I was listening to a lecture, or it was a talk. Prabhupada was saying that in America, the husband and wife, they're not very attached to each other. And he says, and this is also good. You're like, okay. They can like join the temple or something like that, and take sannyas or whatever. But it was like you wouldn't expect it. You wouldn't like other divorce and everything. He said, and this is also good.
This is why it's so important to hear Srila Prabhupada's lectures and read his letters, because so much of what Prabhupada speaks is found in the intonation of his voice, the mood in which he says it. And sometimes you read a transcript of a lecture or a conversation, and you're thinking, and you pull that quote, and you put it on a billboard, and it makes Prabhupada appear like the most uncaring or ridiculous person in the world. And yet, if you listen to those words in the context of the conversation, you read the context, you hear his words on the recording, and you see Prabhupada was speaking it in a particular mood to a specific audience. He's sometimes joking, sometimes he's saying something in a playful mood. And so I think what you said sparked a thought in me that it's so important when we read Srila Prabhupada that we read him in context. We read him in context and we read him in his entirety, in his fullness. That we understand, this is in Sanskrit, this principle in Vedanta is called samanvaya. Samanvaya means reading a work in its entirety, not taking, so this is in Vedanta Sutra, Madhvacharya makes the point, if you take one sutra out of context and you highlight it, you can misconstrue the meaning of what's being said, unless you take into account what's said at the beginning of the book and what's said at the end and what's said at the middle and put it all together in a complete whole. This is true of any good reading, of good readership. And it's true of Srila Prabhupada as well, that when we read Srila Prabhupada's books, we should read them in their fullness, in their entirety. So we understand what comes before, what comes after. What does Srila Prabhupada say on this topic? Again and again and again in different places. How many times does he say this and how many times does he say this? 100 times he makes this point and 1 time he makes this point. When we read him in his fullness, then we read him properly. And when we take each statement and we read it in its immediate context. This is another principle in Vedanta study. Taking what comes before and what comes after. Sridhar Swami, when he writes his commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam, he says, I will read Srimad Bhagavatam and explain it based on what comes before and what comes after. He's saying, I will give you a contextual explanation of each verse. And he sticks to that very, very carefully. So when we read a statement from Srila Prabhupada, our modern technology is both a great boon and a great challenge, because the ability of us to search and to extract a line out of context has just skyrocketed. But when we read before and when we read after in the same purport, Srila Prabhupada will often make a point very strongly and then pull back from it very strongly as well. And the same purport. He'll make both points. So 2 things, right? Reading in context and reading in completeness, in wholeness. These are significant principles of Vaishnava hermeneutics, or Vaishnava method of explanation and interpretation. Yes, Prabhu.
A few years ago, someone posted some quotes from Srila Prabhupada, many devotees. The battery's going up.
Yeah.
Maybe you can repeat.
I'll repeat your question.
Yes, so a few years ago, someone posted some negative things, just flat on the internet, and quoting Srila Prabhupada and how negative he was. And I think they had like 51 quotes there. And everything appears to be very convincing. So I took it upon myself to go through our books for every one of those quotes and read the context in which Srila Prabhupada said this. Yes, Srila Prabhupada did mention every one of them, but whoever posted this pulled it completely out of context and just switched the entire meaning and intention.
Yeah. Prabhu was saying that he recently read on the internet, someone posted 50 some quotes from Srila Prabhupada. all very, very negative things meant to show Prabhupada in a negative light. And it seemed very convincing on the surface, but then he took it upon himself to look back at the context of each one of those quotations, and their meaning was very, very different. It was tempered in important ways in those contexts. So thank you for sharing that. Yes.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for this topic, how it was presented. So in addition to reading Srila Prabhupada's books, and you mentioned letters, Prabhupada also commented, hearing is also reading, so hearing his recorded lectures, his recorded conversations, the morning walks, etc. To also get a insight into Srila Prabhupada, the person. So when you read, just like, I don't know your name, but like...
Dharmaraj Das. Dharmaraj Devadas.
Dharmaraj Deva, okay, Hare Krishna. So everything is out there on the internet. They can bolster your faith, they can destroy your faith. But if you know Srila Prabhupada, the person, your faith will be very secure. And the ways that can be done are, in addition to what was already said, is to take advantage of the media that has been carefully presented by Siddhanta, by Yadavar, and by other devotees who have written books of their accounts with Srila Prabhupada, so that you get a sense of how he was as a person, a fully spiritualized person, unlike ourselves who are somewhere inside fully spiritualized but not realized, and so we get easily confused and conflicted. So we can have the opportunity to see how he presented the philosophy in a way that was not negative, that was not contrary to so-called morality in the material world even. I know a lot about the statements that are printed out there. If it hadn't been for my experience with Srila Prabhupada, the person, and I hadn't heard from my other God brothers and sisters about Srila Prabhupada, the person, their experiences with him, some of these statements could really turn you upside down. So I'm suggesting, in addition to the books and etc., please take the time to read those books that have been written by Srila Prabhupada's disciples, to watch the videos following Srila Prabhupada by Yadavar and Prabhupada's memory series by Siddhanta Prabhu. These are giving you another insight of Srila Prabhupada that can strengthen your faith and deepen your understanding and make you even more eager to read his books.
Thank you so much for that very important reminder. If I can add a thought to what Malati Prabhu said, another way, we were talking about ways in which we can actually make Prabhupada disappear from our lives. And another way we can do that is by divinizing him too much, by kicking him upstairs, so to speak, where obviously if we make Prabhupada Krishna, that's just Mayavad, that's horrible. But also by losing Prabhupada the person. I've heard devotees speak of to wipe away, to brush away Prabhupada's struggles, as if there were no struggles, as if there was no challenge, as if everything Prabhupada floated through this world just everything magically happening. And that does a great disservice to him. I remember one time after Tamal Krishna Maharaj published TKG's diary, I asked him, there are certain sections in there which describe in a lot of graphic detail Prabhupada's medical procedures and the pain, the physical pain that Prabhupada was in during those procedures. And I asked Maharaj, why did you put those details there? I mean, they're not what you would typically write about your spiritual master. And he said, because I want people to know what Prabhupada was experiencing and how he was a person. That as a person, someone we can emulate, and yet he was not like us. That's the paradox that we have to hold about the spiritual master. That he is not like us, but he is like us. He's not like us, otherwise, why should we follow him if he's like us, right? I mean, we're struggling, he was struggling, what's the difference? If he's like us, why should we follow him? But if he's not like us, what can we gain from him? What can we learn? How can we possibly follow his example? This paradox is encapsulated in the Gurvashtaka. Sakshad Haritvena Samasta Shastre Uktastathabhav Yataiva Sadbhi. All the great sages and the scriptures say that you, O spiritual master, are of the same quality as Hari, Sakshad Haritvena. In case anyone misses, you see, here's the thing. Sakshad Hari would be impersonalism. You are Krishna yourself. You are Hari. So there's a little suffix there added. That abstract noun I was speaking of yesterday, tva. You are of the quality of Hari. Haritvena, tva. Just that little suffix makes all the difference. In case we miss that little suffix, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur makes it clear in the next line, just in case you miss it. Kintu prabhorya priya eva tasya. The word kintu drives it home. It's but. However, he's not Hari. Okay? He's very, very dear to Lord Hari. And this is why he is as good as Hari. That paradox of Prabhupada is not an ordinary human being. But yes, Prabhupada is a human being. He's a person. That's where we want to be. Because then we can both glorify Prabhupada and emulate him. And that's what we want to do. Right? So I very much appreciate this point about not losing Srila Prabhupada the person. Otherwise we make him disappear.
Thank you so much for the wonderful class. I want to point out a dichotomy, if that's the correct term. You were speaking earlier about how it's so important to read and study Srila Prabhupada's books. And when you become familiar, so to speak, although you didn't use that term, you can predict, or you know what Srila Prabhupada is going to say. The dichotomy that I want to present is that of understanding of philosophy versus understanding how to apply the principles that are presented in the philosophy. From hearing from Shyamsundar Prabhu, who was Srila Prabhupada's personal secretary for a number of years, Harisari Prabhu, who was Srila Prabhupada's personal servant for a number of years, Sridhar Guru, similar. I've spoken with all of them on this context, and each of them said that you would always try, when you're in Prabhupada's presence, it's just natural to think, how's Prabhupada going to say about this situation? And each one of them said, you could never predict how Prabhupada was going to respond. The same situation, different people, different context. And so that's, on the one, what you were presenting so nicely is we're understanding the philosophy, so that we go, yes, this is what comes after this, and this verse follows from that one. But in how to apply those principles in our day-to-day lives. Prabhupada was completely unpredictable because he understood the principles and how to apply them. And you know, any reasonably intelligent person can understand the basic tenets, the basic principles of the philosophy in a short period of time, a few months, few years. But we can go our entire lives and not know how to apply them. So there's a big dichotomy, a big difference there between understanding the philosophy and how to apply the principles in terms of time, place, and circumstance. That's one point I want to make. Another is that we can also lose the presence of the spiritual master by not following his instructions. We know what they are, we've heard them a gazillion times, but if we don't act on those, then the connection becomes weakened. And we can have so many good reasons for not doing so. Just like here in New Vrindavan, Srila Prabhupada instructed many times, build 7 temples, as these Goswamis built in Vrindavan. And there's even a letter, Prabhupada just wrote that in 1968 before his first visit, and then he continued repeatedly in 1977, 7 temples and other things. And there's even a letter to Kirtanananda Maharaj dated October 1972. Now, Prabhupada's letters is kind of like the TV game show Jeopardy, where you hear the answer, but gotta guess the question. And Srila Prabhupada wrote, regarding the 7 temples, to just begin immediately with whatever you have locally available, whatever you have on hand, something like that. And later on, they can be transformed into first-class temples of the world. And we did that. We began 1973 with the first temple of Radhika up on top of a hill that we call Muhulaman Buddhiji Hill. And after digging out the foundation, just doing the excavation of the rock, the thought came that how can we build a home for Krishna if we don't even have a proper home for his pure devotee, for his representative? When Srila Prabhupada would come to visit, we have old farmhouses. They were 60, 80, 100 years old. Prabhupada stayed, no problem. He was happy. But how did we do this? So the idea occurred that let's pause on building a temple for Krishna and build a home for Srila Prabhupada, so that when he comes here, we can ask him, Prabhupada, you told us to do this. You told us to make the entire state of West Virginia Krishna conscious. How do we do that? So Prabhupada, you told us to make a replica of Vrindavan here. How do we do that? So Prabhupada, you told us to build 7 temples. We can barely feed ourselves. How do we do that? So then the idea was to, when he's here, just question the person. You gave us these instructions. We don't know how to do them. Please instruct us. How do we do them? And by logic and reasoning, we can come up with so many reasons which appear very solid. We don't have the money, we don't have the manpower, we don't have the land, we don't have the resources in that. But by just trying to fulfill the order of the spiritual master, what does Krishna say? I preserve what you have and I provide what you lack. Simply by that endeavor to try. If we don't try, we can have very solid, logical reasons, but then we won't get that mercy, we won't get that Krishna's magic. And the spiritual master just, because we've decided no, and he's received, okay? Like that.
Thank you so much for those points. On your first point about we know the philosophy, but we may not know how to apply it, I was thinking how this is one reason why Prabhupada's books keep on giving again and again, is because as the application of the same principles can change as we move through different phases of our life, right? So I remember reading the story of Kardama Muni and Devahuti in Srimad Bhagavatam and Prabhupada's purports there. And when I was single and I was a brahmachari, and they meant one thing, and it was very significant and very powerful. Reading that same section again when I became a grihastha, the application was very different in that context, how to apply it. And then I had kids, and that application changed again in terms of what this means. And I'm sure one day when I'm vanaprastha, that'll mean something yet different, right? So Prabhupada's books really are the gift that keep on giving, because each time you read it, and you don't realize, sometimes we don't realize that 5 years ago I read this, now I'm reading it 5 years later, how much I've changed, because you see, I'm reading the same story, and yet the application and the meaning of that story as it's applied in our life looks very, very different, just in the space of 5 years. And that's heartening, because it shows, hey, we're moving as well. We're hopefully advancing, right, in our practice. So thank you for that.
Thank you for your wonderful class. This is a little bit of a sensitive topic, but I'd like to get your opinion on it. So there's some discussion that Srila Prabhupada's books may not be the best introduction to brand new people to Krishna consciousness, due to some of those statements that Malati Prabhu mentioned kind of can turn your world upside down. And therefore, there's a necessity to produce kind of new versions of Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, and devotees write their own books and sort of keep Srila Prabhupada's books more as reference books, because we don't want to change his books posthumously. It's kind of unethical to do that. But keep them as they are, that's what Prabhupada wrote. And then, put books in the front that are more palatable. It's the same teachings, but more palatable to people nowadays.
Yeah, so this is a very important question, and something I've given a little bit of thought to. There's in Bhagavad Gita where Krishna says that verse, Kaunteya pratijanihi name bhakta pranashyati. O Arjuna, you declare it boldly to the world that my devotee never perishes. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains in his commentary that Krishna is asking Arjuna to declare it boldly that his devotee will not perish, even though Krishna himself has said this in the Gita and other places. But he's asking Arjuna to declare this point because the audiences that he wants this message to go to are more likely to believe Arjuna than they are Krishna. And then he says that this is the job of the devotee, to represent Krishna like this. And I would submit that this is the job of a preacher, to make Krishna believable, to show our Lord in the best possible light, to show why he's the most wonderful person that everyone should come and serve. That's our job. Krishna's job is to give the message. Our job is to make it believable, to make it palatable, to whatever audience Krishna puts us in front of. The same, I feel, is with Srila Prabhupada. With the internet and all of the terror that it brings, there's all this misinformation that gets thrown around in places and so on. And people have misconceptions, and sometimes very sincere persons also. And as followers of Srila Prabhupada, as his disciples and grand disciples, as his children, it's our job to make Srila Prabhupada believable, to make him convincing to any audience that we're in front of. That's the role of the disciple. That's our duty. So if we're writing books as a way to draw people to the lotus feet of our spiritual master, to make Prabhupada convincing to them, to say, are you impressed with what I have to say? Let me introduce you to my father, because I've learned everything from him. This is who he is. That's wonderful. when we think of those or we use those works in any way as replacements, then we're essentially, we're arrogant, but then we're also impersonalists, right? We're trying to replace Krishna. We're trying to replace the spiritual master. And there's few things that are more offensive than that, right? So there's a very fine line there. And that fine line is a distinction in both consciousness and in use of such works. What are we trying to accomplish when we do it? If we think of Srila Prabhupada's books as a beautiful painting, like the Mona Lisa, are we trying to say, well, you know, the nose is a little awkward here. Hold on, let me get a brush and fix that nose, and maybe I'll just make a new Mona Lisa. That'll look a little better. Her smile is too enigmatic anyway. She needs to smile more broadly. That's offensive. That's a problem. But if we think of ourselves as creating a frame around the painting, to say, I want to frame Prabhupada's words in a way that makes him just right for this gallery, for this audience, that matches the color just perfectly of this painting, then we're doing a service, right? Then we're doing a service. So the parampara has to go on, and that means devotees have to express their realizations on our scriptures. We have to take those works of Srila Prabhupada and we have to present them to address the needs of our current audience. Like yesterday, we were speaking about the environment, right? This is a major concern for all young people today. They want to see how any religious traditions has solutions to offer to our environmental crisis. Prabhupada has given us the resources, like that purport I was speaking about trees. He's given us the resources. The Bhagavatam has it. It's our job to take those resources and say, hey, I've got something to say. My spiritual master has something to say about this. Here's an introduction, and if you want to know more, this is where I would lead you. Then that's how the parampara continues. When we take and we apply that same theology to our present context, we deploy it for the audience and their needs at this point without changing the essential message. Then we're doing a service. And if we see it as a replacement, then we're offensive. Yeah. So it's all in the intention and in the application of it. Okay, maybe the last question, and then we can break.
Thank you. It was such an insightful class. I was listening very much time. I have a question about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj.
Louder, please.
Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj gave the instruction to Srila Prabhupada in 1922. And it was a whole 44 years later that this was accomplished. So how do we take a lesson when we are enthusiastic about serving our own spiritual masters? How do we persevere to such a high level? 44 years is a very long time for some of us. That's a whole lifetime. We're not able to follow our own spiritual masters' instructions for whatever reason they may be, resources, time, and so forth. But the level of perseverance and patience that he exhibited is something really difficult for us to really follow. And I feel, as a second generation disciple, as a grand disciple, the danger of complacency is very high. And we sometimes, I speak for myself, like to ride on the laurels of our own spiritual master rather than doing the service. We develop this pride that my spiritual master has done this, so I'm okay in the background because somebody else is taking care of spreading the mission. And that's a huge danger. So how do we develop that kind of perseverance, which seems very daunting to me? 44 years is a long time. Thank you.
So that's a wonderful question and a great one to conclude upon. When Dhruva Maharaj heads to the forest, when he's angry because his father has insulted him and rejected him, and he's heading to the forest, and he wants a kingdom that far exceeds his father's and his grandfather's. Then in the forest he meets Narada Muni, and Narada Muni is going to be his spiritual master. And Narada gives him his first instruction. He says, go home, give up your anger, be peaceful. You're a child, let it go, and be happy. And Dhruva Maharaj says, I know your instruction is the best. It's the highest. It's best for me. But I'm not in a place where I can follow that instruction. So please give me an instruction I can follow, and I will do it with full determination. So Narada Muni sees that honesty, and he sends him to the forest to perform austerities. And that path is not easy. It's not like he gives him an easy way out. 6 months of no eating and no drinking and barely on dry leaves and a drop of water here and there. But the process of following that second instruction purifies him to the point that then he's able to follow the first instruction, which is to go home with a light heart, to give up his anger. So we learn a very important lesson there, that sometimes the spiritual master gives us an instruction that we struggle to follow. And if we reject that instruction by saying, well, I don't really know if it's right or not, or it's right, but it's not right for me, or maybe he'll change his mind, then we're acting in an offensive mentality, especially when it comes to Srila Prabhupada's instructions to us. Prabhupada had very, very high standards for all of us, and we struggle to live up to those standards. But if we are honest with the spiritual master, and that's the key, right? Shinvatam swakatha Krishna punya shavana kirtana hridyantasta hyabhadrani vidunoti sahitsatam. Prabhupada translates that as Krishna cleanses the heart of the honest devotee. If we're honest with the spiritual master, and we say, Srila Prabhupada, I know this is what you want of me, but I'm just not there yet. I'm struggling. Please guide me. Give me an instruction I can follow. And we follow that instruction, we will purify ourselves and uplift ourselves enough where we can follow ultimately what he wants of us. So perseverance is often a matter of receiving an instruction that is an instruction that we can follow, sticking with that instruction and advancing in that way despite our struggles until ultimately we can come up to the expectation that is desired of us. If it takes us time to follow the spiritual master's instruction, that is not a problem. We see this in Srila Prabhupada's life as well. But we cannot let the fire die. The fire to follow that instruction has to be burning brightly. Prabhupada he said himself, I never forgot the instruction I received from my spiritual master. So if we ever find that the instructions we have received, if we find that we're not able to live up to them, it's okay, if it takes time. But if we find that the desire to follow those instructions, the determination starts to weaken, then we should panic. Then we should find a solution. We should get into the association of those for whom that instruction still burns brightly. And when a candle is weakening, and you put it next to another candle, or if a flame is weakening, you put next to another flame which has fuel, what happens? They both burn brightly, even brighter. So we find the association of others for whom that fire still burns brightly, and say, I want to be in their association because I never want to give up my struggle. Even if it takes a little time, and even if I have to sometimes take a circuitous route to get to that instruction, it's okay. I'm not going to blame the instruction. I'm not going to blame the spiritual master. I'm not even going to blame myself. I'm just going to try and be honest and tell the spiritual master, my dear Srila Prabhupada, I know this is the best thing for me. I know the only thing that will make me happy is to be a devotee of Krishna. And yet I'm torn with all these material desires and these anarthas. Please, give me a path I can follow. Show me what I need to do next. And Srila Prabhupada will guide us. He will show us the path. He will give us the next baby step to take. And it may take a little while, but we'll get there. We'll get to his lotus feet. With that, I want to thank you all so much for your association and for your attention. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanande.
Thank you very much, devotees. It was a wonderful class to listen to. I hope all of us have learned something, and we will be able to pick up some instructions from here and follow them. Have a wonderful Krishna conscious day. We'll see you all again tomorrow morning. Hare Krishna.